Duniya has worked as a researcher on Islamic trauma healing and reconciliation over the past 6 years in collaboration with the University of Washington Center for Anxiety and Traumatic Stress. She pursued her higher education at the University of Minnesota and graduated there with a BA in political science. She also earned her Master of Science in Criminal Justice at Boston University. And she worked as a community advocate and program manager, where she learned the need for trauma healing in the Somali and Muslim communities. And I will say, from my own perspective, Duniya and I met a couple of years ago. I think she reached out to us, and we met. Myself and a couple other colleagues met with her, and she talked about her work. And I just remember thinking, we have to share this with the NAMI community. I think this is, this work that she has done is so important and just really exciting, and weaving in so many different elements that don't get talked about enough in the very kind of mainstream, kind of white-led medical mental health system that sort of has become the default for any kind of mental health treatment, which again, it works really well and is very supportive for a lot of people, and it's not for a lot of other people. And I think really at NAMI, our role is to talk about all the options, right? And talk about what's out there and all the different ways that mental health support can and should look, to help and support folks and build connections and build support and healing. So all that being said, I'm so excited to introduce you all and welcome Duniya Lang this morning, who can take it away. Sorry, Tommy, you appear to have stopped sharing because I talked for so long. Sorry about that. I did not mean for this to go on. I got very excited. But yes, I will turn it back over to our presenter today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'm excited for this opportunity today and presenting the Islamic Trauma Healing to organization and to our participants. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So today I'm going to be presenting the Islamic Trauma Healing, which is a mental health program. As the name it shows that it's faith-based program. I wanted to start with, let me see, before I go to the overview of the program, I would just wanted to give you a little background of the reason for this program and the rationale of the program. If you can give me a second, that would be great. Thank you. And I just wanted to start, oh dear, that's later, okay, sorry. So basically, when I graduated from the University of Minnesota, and I started work with a number of organizations, East African Community Organization in Seattle, Washington. And that is where I encountered people who were victims of war and seemed traumatized. Therefore, I became interested in trauma and its impact and ways to heal from psychological trauma. Just to give you a little bit background of why I created the Islamic Trauma Healing. So when I encountered people who come from mainly Somali community that came from places that had war, basically I recognized the trauma that existed with the people I worked with. So, and after I think about that, so, and in undergraduate, I studied political science. I didn't have background in psychology, but I recognized the need for, mental health and trauma because of the people I was working with. A lot of them had trauma. So at the time, I had two things in mind. First, I noticed how the Western psychology treatment did not work for the Somali community because mainly they did not trust the psychology, the Western psychology, and they were not familiar with it. That gave me understanding of there must be need for cultural and faith-based treatment for our community because of the lack of trust or familiarity with the mainstream Western treatment, psychological treatment, which no one seemed to be seeking or wanting to participate. So that was the rationale for me for the program, the Islamic Trauma Healing program. And then I traveled to, Africa and Arabia, and wanted to really try to look into what was there for a community like ours, where we're actually coming from the Islamic faith, and we have a different culture. In my travel in Africa and Arabia, I learned that there were no programs that were effective or even spoke or talked about and how to heal from mental health, other than the Western treatment, which is not used much in Africa or Arabia, to be honest. I found out there were mostly I found out programs of psychiatric programs or treatment in the hospitals in Africa and Arabia, but psychology is not really something cared about or talked about in Africa and Arabia. Through my research, I learned that was the case. And then in Arusha, Tanzania, I was introduced to the Truth and Reconciliation program in South Africa and in Rwanda to help the victims of war, to treat, to reconcile, basically. So after I learned the program, I also learned there hasn't been any trauma treatment. So for me, I was thinking trauma. So the program didn't have trauma component to it. It was just, trying to address violence through reconciliation. And then that's when I came up with Islamic Trauma Healing in Arusha, Tanzania, and in 2011. Fortunately, I was excited to create an Islamic Trauma Healing program. And that is how the program came about. I came back to Washington State, Seattle, approached the UW, and then that was 2012. And then we started creating this program with UW helping me, put the program together and create it. It was very successful. The program has been recognized. We finished the program, actually, we completed the development of the program in 2016, did a pilot study to collect the data of the effectiveness of the program in the community at the Abu Bakr Mosque, one of the biggest centers in Washington State. The program participation was amazing. It was huge. The community really appreciated the program. They liked the program. The data showed the program was very effective in terms of treating trauma and anxiety and depression. And then after that data was collected, the U.S. National Mental Health Institute recognized our program to be effective and achieving the goals of healing and reconciliation. It was huge, and it was funded by them as well. And so that is just a little background of the program. Sorry about that. So now I want to go to the next slide. So now we can talk about, can you go back to the overview, the slide next to the, yeah, this one here. Go back one slide, I'm sorry. Thank you, yeah. So now I'm gonna show you what the program is. what it's composed of, what it achieves, and what it does, and how it looks in real time. So this is the Islamic Trauma Healing Program goals. My vision was to achieve 2 goals. And the first goal was to heal and reconcile the Muslim and Somali community through Islamic and exposure-based forms of trauma healing therapy. So the idea was to basically not have only faith, but also have forms of trauma healing therapy. So basically integrating Islamic concept of healing and into the mainstream Western therapy. The second goal was to improve lives by reducing trauma-related difficulties, including PTSD and depression. So the second goal again was to, reduce trauma-related mental health problems, including PTSD and again depression and anxiety. And when we actually ran the pilot study in the community, it actually helped to reduce trauma-related anxiety, depression, and other mental health problems because of the Islamic concept of healing and reconciliation. That piece was very successful. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what the central of the Islamic Trauma Healing Program in terms of the Islamic concept is prophet narratives and discussions. So this is the main, the center or central or the core and aspect of Islam that helped, the program in terms of healing and reconciliation. So we used the prophet narratives and discussions in the psychotherapy sessions. And we had, so the program has about 8 sessions. 2 sessions, one is introduction. The first session is introduction. The last one is basically closing. And then we have 6, therapy sessions. Next slide, please. So prophet narratives and discussion goals. So why do we have actually prophet narratives? And we had to rationalize that. And this is what it is. View suffering and trauma from the perspective of the prophets. So to make sense to our participants for the program, we wanted to show them in the perspective of prophets when it comes to trauma, and in terms of connecting to the psychotherapy we were trying to conduct, right? So people were when prophets talked about a lot of our participants knew about the prophet stories because they grew up with prophet stories. Islam talks about there are a lot of prophet stories in the Islamic religion. So that's why I used the actually Islamic because prophets have been faced the challenges in their lives and in their communities, and some of them and according to Islam, faced tribulation, trauma, difficulty. Some of them were, attacked. So there are stories of how prophets were traumatized in the Islamic religion. So that's why I used thinking of prophets and how they dealt with their situations where they faced a lot of challenges, so people could actually relate to that. The second aspect was counter unhelpful beliefs about self, others, or Allah. So speaking of the prophet stories also helped us, the participants, to reflect and think about, because trauma causes a lot of unhelpful thoughts and thinking of self and others, you know. So we actually also addressed that through prophet stories. And the third one was allow groups to discuss together the role and impact for trauma on life. We also discussed those issues in the prophet stories. Next slide, please. Okay. And continuing the prophet narratives, these are the core prophet stories that we used in the program. The first one is faith during hard times. We used the prophet AYYUB. So basically, we discussed a lot of the story of Prophet AYYUB, and you know, to build faith in times of difficulties. So that addressed how could we actually have faith when there's crisis, when there's trauma, when someone is victimized, you know, in many ways, especially when there is violence involved. Then we used, that was the first session. And then the first session addresses trials build the strength. It addresses how to actually become stronger and build the strength and resilience during trauma, when somebody experiences trauma. And then we used the Prophet Yusuf. Prophet Yusuf had a lot of trials and difficulties and trauma, betrayal, for example, being persecuted, things like that. So then that gave us also, and then we saw his story, how he become stronger after he went through a lot of difficulties. And then we have overcoming fear. It's how do actually we overcome fear when it's trauma, because trauma causes a lot of fear and mistrust of others, and fear of situations, places, you know, things like that, because of the trauma itself. So then we used the Prophet Musa, and he, according to Islam, the story of Prophet Musa is one of you know, and trials and tribulations and difficulties and enslavement, and not Musa. No, Musa is not the one. I think that was Prophet. Yeah, Musa. That's Moses, Prophet Moses. So how did Prophet Moses overcome fear of where in his time his, you know, community has been enslaved and persecuted, and he was part of that. And then how did he become? How did he overcome fear? Is what we focused on, this story of Prophet Moses. Then we had the fourth session, redemption of self and others. Prophet Yunus. We also used Prophet Yunus to highlight redemption of self and others, especially in terms of war and civil war and violence, and you know, community that had been fighting each other, things like that. And then how do we actually seek redemption, forgiveness, and with others and with ourselves, also made a lot of sense. And then we have faith, courage, and hope for the future. And we used Prophet Abraham for his, you know, courage, faith, and hope for the future when he went through crisis and difficulties, and in the context of even his own community. And then we used to reconciliation, where Prophet Muhammad was the model, and he reconciled with his community where there has been war and conflict and difficult situations. He brought about reconciling his community, and then we learn ways to reconcile in times of difficulties and war and violence. So reconciliation is also something that is very important in the program. The program is about healing, but the main purpose for me was to heal and reconcile. No, heal and forgive, because I realized that you cannot actually forgive and heal without forgive and heal without forgive and reconcile without healing. That was my whole point of having trauma healing, Islamic trauma healing and reconciliation. Then it's based, program based on healing, so to reconcile. Basically, I found out that we cannot talk about reconciliation without healing, because when people are suffering, and it's hard to forgive. It's hard to forgive and reconcile when you are really traumatized and you're not healed. So my vision was to heal, so we're able to reconcile and forgive others. So that was the main idea of the trauma healing program. Eventually to heal and reconcile and move on the personal level and also on the community level. And so that is the rationale for this program. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay. So to read sorry about that. So reading of the narratives, in order to read the narratives of the prophets, this is how it worked out. As a group leader, first to read out loud the full narrative. So in the sessions, what we did was we have facilitators of the sessions, and then there's a group leader. The group leader first reads out loud the full narrative of the prophets. For example, the first prophet, every session has a prophet story. So he starts to, or she starts to read out loud the full narrative. So that's what this is. Can you go to the next session, please? Okay, so this is an example of the prophet story. The story of Prophet AYYUB. So let me read this to you so you have some understanding of what that exactly looks like. So this is how it starts. For example, we talk about the AYYUB, the Prophet AYYUB's, story, to put it into context. And then this is how it starts. Allah presents us with the story of AYYUB, who remained patient in his suffering of extreme pain and loss. Allah said about AYYUB, truly we found him patient, how excellent a slave. Verily, he was ever oft to returning in repentance to us. In this, Allah underlines the quality of AYYUB's patience and fact that he remembered his merciful Lord in a time of calamity, when he lost his family, wealth, and his own health. So basically, the story emphasizes the problems that Prophet AYYUB faced and the challenges he faced in his life. And then we're emphasizing his character, how patient he was, and God praises him for being patient, and in the Quran, and that was actually something that helped him go through the difficulties he's been through in times of calamity, where he lost his family, wealthy, and health. So in this, I'm emphasizing, this Prophet AYYUB. He models us how to be patient, because a lot of us faced similar situations where we lost family members, we lost wealth, and we lost our health in war times. So that's where the model comes in, the Jabe's model. And so Prophet Jabe was a very rich man with many children. He had a lot of cattle, sheep, and lands of great farms. Suddenly, Jabe lost all of his children and wealth. So again, we just talking about how the situation of Prophet Jabe and the difficulties he faced to model for our participants. And next slide, please. Okay, group discussion. So this is how the group discussion works. Just to understand how the sessions work. It actually, we do the groups. So again, the Islamic Trauma Healing is kind of designed for group sessions, because again, I had in mind to have group healing and group support and group context, because in our community is very communal, and healing is best administered in a place where people come together, share tea, share stories, talk with each other, and then build friendship. So that helps more for people to really come out of their isolation, because trauma causes, again, isolation, and it causes depression and all that kind of stuff. So if you have a group discussion and group meetings and group in a group setting, especially people like our community, we come from, we're very community-based society. So that was, again, the reason why I thought about the group sessions, where especially when we want to heal and reconcile with the community, with ourselves, with our family, then we have in that community setting, it makes more sense. So that is what the discussion is about, the group discussion. And then we ask questions, we are now going to talk, for example, this is the first how the session starts. We are now going to talk as a group about Jabe's life. So these are the questions we ask. What was Jabe's life like before his sickness? What was Jabe's life like during and after his sickness? What is the role of affiliation and affliction and suffering in faith? What kind of example is Jabe of a person of faith? So discussing his, trying to focus on and reflect on who he was and what he did and how he overcome all his adversities. It made sense to the participants in terms of wanting also to relate to that, and then also move on and try to be patient in their situation and move forward. It really helped a lot in this discussion. It's one of the things that the participants actually liked a lot in the sessions, because of the Prophet stories and the discussion and the questions and the reflection. It really helped a lot. Next slide, please. And then this is for every Prophet story. Again, we had 6 Prophet stories, right? So I'm just showing you like one example of how Prophet stories play out in the sessions. Okay, so then we do some summary of the Prophet story. At the end of the session, summarize main points. We actually summarize the main points. You may say something like this. Again, this is what the session facilitator does after the Prophet stories were narrated, and there's a discussion. So then some things that are important for us to remember about Jabe are that it's possible for anyone to suddenly be hit by a personal disaster. Even if you lose your possessions and feel alone, you are always valuable and worthwhile, and Allah will always stand by you in times of suffering. Never lose faith that suffering will end and you will recover what you need. You will recover faith can help you in times of need. So basically, these are the discussions, we have in the sessions after the prophet stories, to just have sense of direction of how maybe a person can heal in this kind of situation. Next slide, please. Okay, tips for leading the discussion. And then we have tips of leading the discussion. This is again to people we train to lead the sessions in trauma healing sessions. Show that you are actively listening. So it's very important that we listen to people in the session. Listening is very important when it shows empathy and care. So that is included in our session. Be encouraging when people say something good, for example, when they take risks to be honest or vulnerable. So again, you build in trust and rapport, and trying to connect with the participants of the trauma healing sessions, and this helps to for them to become open, because trauma causes you to mistrust people and be isolated again, So this also helps this confidence building and also trust building, where you allow people to express themselves and they feel safe in their expression. Thank you. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. Again, this is the tip. These are the tips for leading the discussion. Again, how the sessions are led in the Islamic trauma healing sessions. So methods for active listening and providing encouragement. So this is what we do to do active listening and providing encouragement to people who are having sessions. So reflections is one of them. So like a mirror, repeating back what we said. Yes, like you said, Allah helps us to survive. So this also helps again to have, it's a guided discussion, right? So it helps the participants to actually reflect on the session and what was talked about and the discussion and the prophet stories. And then going deeper, encourage the group to talk more about the topic. Yes, does anyone else want to say more about and how Allah helps us survive? So again, we want to, encourage the trauma healing participants to, talk more and be able to connect with themselves and with others. Simply agree. So again, there's no judgment in the sessions, and everyone is free to say what they want to say and express their feelings and emotions, and provide a safe space. And that's very necessary for when there's trauma. And then you say great point, or I agree, or that makes a lot of sense. Again, to give confidence to the participants of these sessions. Okay, next slide, please. This is a lot of discussion. Okay, so this is what the program is about. In-depth explanation of what the sessions are and how they play out and what is included. So in these sessions, we have also breathing exercise. We do breathing exercise just like psychotherapy. When we have psychotherapy, people to be able to, calm themselves and try to connect with themselves. That helps people who suffer trauma to learn how to cope with anxiety when they actually have flashbacks, for example, or when they feel anxious because of the trauma memories. So that is why we have also breathing exercise. And, it's time for questions. If you have questions, you're welcome to ask me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Duniya. Yeah, feel free to, if you do have a question, anybody raise your hand or put it in chat. I wanted to ask one or ask you to touch on one thing that you had told us about originally when we met about the program, which is the piece, I can't remember if you mentioned it today, but where I think, what was it? Because it can be really re-traumatized. Sharing your story can be powerful, but it can also be re-traumatizing to hear others share about traumatic events. You had your strategy was to have folks pray, so they were kind of in dialogue, right, with Allah,
Right.
kind of with themselves, but not necessarily with others. So they were sharing their story, but also in a more private way that wasn't re-exposing folks. Could you talk about that just a tiny bit while folks are thinking of questions?
Yes, absolutely true. Yeah. So one of the things we came up with in terms of, people talking about their traumatic experiences, because, that can be traumatizing. And also a lot of people may not want to share exactly what happened until they actually heal fully and they feel comfortable to talk about their traumatic experiences. This avoidance, people who are traumatized, they don't like to talk about their trauma because the fear of, triggers and, remembering what happened. So normally what we do is to deal with trauma, and that's a coping mechanism where we don't want to revisit that pain we suffered, So it's normally that happens. It's normal to people who are traumatized. I'll tell you a story. I had a friend. So this friend was a close friend of mine. And then one time I was given training, trauma healing training. That was for City of Seattle, actually. But anyways, in that training, we were talking about the war and what happened in Somalia, and things like that. There was discussion. And then in that particular time, my friend talked about how her brother and father was killed in the war. And I never knew this. She never told me about it. She never talked about that. So I was actually surprised that, and it's not a laughing matter, but I'm just saying it was shocking because it's just something, even you don't know what happened to your own friend, to that extent that my own friend lost her dad and brother in the war, but I never knew because she would never tell me about it and she would never talk about it. And then I realized that's across the board, for everyone. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. So again, to actually, because it's a coping mechanism. If you want to talk about that, unless you have a safe space, it kind of re-traumatizes you. And I will tell you another story that's important in terms of avoidance, how people avoid their traumatic experiences. And there is returnization if actually people talk about that, unless they're doing it in a safe space, like, sessions like therapy, in places like where they have trauma healing or trauma therapy, right? In those kind of safe spaces, they may be able to talk, but just talking about it and randomly, it can cause a lot of pain and returnization. So what happened was the program I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the Truth and Reconciliation program that was administered and used in Rwanda and South Africa after the apartheid. What happened was they found out recently, there was research done. Actually, there's an article written by about that by Georgetown University, where they talked about how the program was effective reconciling, but when people went through the program, they become traumatized because of the revisiting the memories and the stories and what happened to them. And that was really something that was negative, because a lot of people went through the Truth and Reconciliation program were traumatized, you know, because the program didn't have PTSD treatment. And so anyways, so for us, when we're doing the program, we had discussion about that. So we come up with a model where people will talk their traumatic experience to God, to Allah. Okay, so what we did is in the sessions, we have a time where the participants will actually share their story with Allah, with God. You know, they will have time for themselves separately, each individual, and they will have a corner, and then they will try to talk to Allah and narrate the story, you know, the traumatic story, and then starts talking about what happened to them from the beginning to end. So for healing, you know, it's necessary for us to, when we are traumatized, to remember what happened, so that it doesn't become painful, you know, it doesn't stay in our memory. So to process the memories of pain, we need to really share the story and talk about it and feel comfortable that we talk about it. So then that's exactly what we thought was a good solution. And it worked, actually. People liked that in our sessions. Not everybody, we don't want to people talk about what happened exactly to them. They will have time to talk about that to Allah. And then also it helps confidentiality, because a lot of people may not want to talk about their story.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. Are there questions or anything that folks want to share? And put it in chat. You can raise your Zoom hand down at the bottom. You have the three little more dots under reactions. You can raise your hand, and then one of us will see you. One of the things I love about this this program is that I think a lot of us have experience in one setting or the other, right? In kind of a mainstream medical system that says religion doesn't help or faith doesn't help, right? It doesn't work. It can't fix anything. Just do this. Go see a doctor. Go see a therapist. Go do this. And then, and or on the other side of things, right? Where in a faith community, they say this doesn't, you know, either mental illness isn't real, or, you know, just pray, or you don't need to go see, you know, therapy or any of these therapeutic interventions don't work. They don't count, you know, and this really shows the ways that pieces of, you know, pieces of that of the science, right? The sort of scientific psychotherapeutic process can be woven into this existing faith that is so sustaining for people, and really provide that context to help shape that healing process. I have one other quick question, I guess, for you, unless there's other questions. Anyone is welcome to interrupt. If you do have a question, I was just, because this was designed as kind of a pilot short-term intervention, do you have ideas or want to talk about maybe the ideas for continuing? Like, would there be a version of this where folks could check back in with the program maybe over time, or if they struggled again, kind of have another, you know, I guess this as a short-term project versus as an ongoing healing process? What do you have ideas or visions or pieces that you've created around that?
Okay, that's a good question. Actually, this wasn't for short-term trauma healing. It was meant for long-term, and it was meant to reach a lot of people. But to continue that, having that support of, you know, people going through the program, and trying to support creating more awareness of mental health, and also you know, to destigmatize, you know, and mental health treatment. We wanted to basically have it as a long term, and community-based, and a lot of people go through the program. Again, the program has been recognized by U.S. National Mental Health Institute to be effective. And then we wanted to have this as an alternative to the Western psychology or mainstream treatment, because again, that doesn't really have any impact on people who have different, culture and faith. And a lot of times the Western, again, they're not familiar with what that is. So, and this also mistrust. So we really thought it would be important to have more programs like this, and then continue benefiting the community.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us. We're right at 10:50. We so appreciate you being part of this event today. And if anyone has any follow-up questions that they think of, you're welcome to reach out to me, and I can pass along your questions or see if I can answer for you. But thank you so much. If we could have a round of virtual applause for Duniya Lang. Thank you so much for coming today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present with Islamic Trauma Healing. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.